They said she wasn't a threat, said she was just a logistics officer, support staff, a glorified pencil pusher with a rifle. But 8 men found out the hard way that underestimating her wasn't just foolish, it was fatal. The kill shots came from so far, they thought they were hearing thunder. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. No one knew her name, they just called her Echo. In the dusty border town of Caramante, Echo was invisible. She wore regulation fatigues, like everyone else, carried her pack, and answered to her CO with clipped precision. She processed satellite data, relayed coordinates, and kept her nose buried in maps and signals. The infantry boys barely noticed her presence until the day her name started echoing through the comms with a tone that wasn't laced with boredom but with reverence. Echo was not her real name, of course. Her birth name was Sierra Cade, daughter of a deep-sea sonar technician and a piano instructor. Raised in the green silence of a northern fjord and trained in the echo of forests and rifles, no one in the unit knew about her past because she'd scrubbed it clean. She had her reasons. Dead ones. That morning the platoon had walked straight into an ambush. They weren't even supposed to be in the valley. They were redirected last minute, following a thermal flare in a supposedly cold sector. By the time they realized it was a trap, it was too late. The terrain was jagged, impossible to navigate fast, and riddled with sniper nests. The enemy had elevation, scope, and patience. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The first man went down with a red bloom across his neck. The second dropped before anyone could scream. It took less than 20 seconds for the platoon to panic and dive for cover behind a boulder field already targeted with pre-marked mortar lines. No one expected Echo to disappear from the comms. She'd been manning the rear with the signals team. Her job was to call for evac, not engage. But when the enemy started picking them off one by one and command remained silent, something in her snapped. Sierra Cade, Echo picked up her custom L115A4 rifle, marked only by an old pine cone carved into the grip, and vanished into the hillside. No one saw her go, but 2 hours later, 8 bodies lay cooling on the shale, each one with a single entry wound through the orbital socket. 8 confirmed kills, range 2,800 meters. Wind shifting cross at 18 miles per hour. Time between shots, 43 seconds. The spotters didn't even have time to react. When the dust cleared and the medevac finally arrived, the CO asked the surviving team who had covered them from the ridgeline. A lieutenant bleeding from the shoulder simply whispered, "Support staff." Word spread fast. Overnight, Echo stopped being a punchline. She became a myth. But what no one realized, what not even Sierra had fully admitted to herself, was that she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Because the men she shot weren't random, they were part of a unit she had once tracked across 3 continents, a unit tied to an event buried so deep in her records, even her handlers thought it was a ghost file. Sierra Cade hadn't come to Caramante to support anyone, she'd come for justice. And the 8 targets were only the beginning. Word was, the leader, the one who gave the order to erase her family, was still alive, and he didn't even know she was there. Not yet, but he would, because Echo had one more bullet, and it had his name carved into it. Sierra didn't sleep that night. The adrenaline that had driven her during the ambush was gone, but its residue clung to her nerves like smoke in her lungs. She sat in the back of a supply truck, hands shaking slightly, not from fear but from restraint. Every muscle in her body begged to move, to continue the mission, but she forced herself to wait. Watch, breathe. Echo couldn't afford mistakes. The unit had relocated to Outpost Ilion, closer to the mountain range, safer, they said. But safety didn't interest Sierra. What she cared about was the data flowing through her encrypted tablet. Topographical overlays, signal intercepts, drone footage that showed heat signatures moving like ants over rocky hills. There were whispers already. Rumors that support had saved them all, that someone in logistics had made shots no one should have made. Sierra let the talk grow. Hearsay was a useful cloak, it made the truth harder to spot. And the truth was this: she had come here not to assist command, but to draw out one man, Colonel Lucas Drov. She remembered his voice before his face. A clipped accent, precise. Cold. He'd interrogated her family years ago. Disappeared her mother, put a bullet through her father's kneecap before vanishing like a shadow into a foggy Baltic night. They'd said it was about intel, that her father had seen something in a deep-sea transmission that wasn't supposed to exist. Her mother tried to smuggle the data to a journalist. They never got the chance. Sira, 15, and mute with grief, had survived, but she hadn't run, she'd trained. The rest of her life became one long breath, and she never exhaled until that day in Caramante. Now she was close. Drov had reappeared, new name, new mercenary outfit, but his fingerprints were all over the intercepted comms. Sira had recognized his syntax in a coded message, an old naval phrasing embedded in the enemy's field chatter. Most people would miss it, but to her it rang louder than a gunshot. She knew what she was doing was unsanctioned, rogue, even. But some debts aren't paid with forgiveness. Some are paid with a scope and a clear line of sight. Her new mission required precision, not just in aim, but in movement. Sira couldn't alert the others yet. She didn't need help. What she needed was access to the comms tower logs from Sector 12, near the mountain pass. If she could pinpoint Drov's command pattern again, she'd triangulate his hideout. She waited until just before sunrise, when the base was sleepy and the guards rotated. In full uniform, badge scanned, she slipped through the comms bunker. 2 minutes. That's all she needed, except she wasn't alone. A man sat at the terminal, tall, wiry, with silver-flecked temples and eyes that had seen too much. He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't even flinch. "Looking for a ghost?" he asked. Sira's spine stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes you do. You're good at disappearing, but not from me." He tapped the terminal once, and turned the screen toward her. It showed Drov's latest ping. Location 5.3 kilometers northeast. Elevation 3,100 meters. Timestamp 2 hours ago. "I've been hunting him for 6 years, the man said quietly. "But I don't think I'm the one who'll catch him." Sira studied him. No insignia. Civilian jacket. Former operative maybe. A spook, but not hostile. He nodded at her rifle. "You're not here to support, you're here to finish something." She didn't deny it. "What's your name?" she asked. "Doesn't matter," he replied, "but if you're going after Drov, there's something you should know." He pulled a drive from his pocket and handed it to her. "Drov's not just a war criminal anymore, he's working on something bigger. Mapping weaponized weather patterns, using old submarine codes to manipulate remote frequency bursts. He's not hiding, he's planning something." Sira stared at the drive. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said. "Just finish it." And then he was gone. Sira pocketed the drive, stepped back into the rising light, and finally, after years of holding her breath, exhaled. The final bullet wasn't just for revenge now, it was for the storm that was coming, and she would meet it with her scope leveled and her finger steady. The wind changed at 2,000 meters. It stopped being a breeze, and became a presence, like a ghost brushing her face, constantly whispering in her ear, daring her to miscalculate. Sira K didn't flinch. She adjusted the windage dial on her scope, gauging the sharp climb ahead. Her breath was slower now, the elevation pressing against her lungs, but she embraced it. Every heartbeat, every gust, every echo in the pass, it all became part of the equation. She was in Drov's domain now. 3 clicks from the outpost, she had split from the patrol under the guise of an aerial recon drone recovery. No one questioned her, no one dared, not after what she'd done in the valley. Her myth had become a shield. She moved alone, silent but deliberate, weaving between switchbacks and ice-covered shale. The target zone Drov had last pinged sat atop a ridgeline above Sector 12, buried in white and shadow. Sira scouted from a crag overlooking the area, a former listening post turned makeshift command center. 2 thermal tents, 3 guards, a short-range jammer, and a mounted observation drone. Everything about it screamed temporary, but dangerous. Sira didn't rush. Precision required patience. She watched the rotation of the guards, the lag in their routines, the way one of them always stepped 3 paces too far from his post before turning. She logged times, calculated distance, measured elevation. There was a storm rolling in from the west, low clouds and unpredictable gusts, but it would take at least an hour to reach the ridge. She had 30 minutes, maybe less. That was enough. She settled into position on a frozen bluff, 1,200 meters away. It was short range by her standards, but the wind made it treacherous. The ground was unstable, the snow a thin veil over jagged rock. One slip, and she'd slide down a 50-foot drop. Sierra locked into prone, breathing through her nose. One shot at a time. First guard, down. Second, turned too late. Third, reached for his radio and caught a bullet between the eyes. Clean, fast, surgical. She moved in before the drone could recalibrate. The base was already half-packed. Evidence of hasty data transfers, burned papers, and empty hard drives. She slipped through the tent flaps and found what she was looking for, not Drav, but something almost as valuable, his voice. A secure comms recording left open on the encrypted laptop, playback paused halfway through. She hit play. Phase 1 is in place. They'll send the support team to Sector 9 under false distress. She'll follow the bait. When she's alone, initiate alpha extraction. No bodies, no evidence. Use the altitude, the cold will do the rest. Sierra's blood ran colder than the mountain air. They knew she was coming, worse, they wanted her to. The kill zone wasn't here, it was a few clicks east, Sector 9. A canyon with no line of sight, no elevation advantage. Perfect for an ambush. And she'd walked right into the first stage of their plan. But if they thought she'd panic, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Sierra uploaded the audio to her drive and set a timed explosive under the comms rig. As she backed away, she spotted something etched into the steel crate by the exit. An old carving, a pine cone. Her father's symbol. Her hands froze. Drav wasn't just planning an ambush. He was mocking her, reminding her he still remembered. Still hunted. The fire ignited behind her, the tent going up in blue flame as she sprinted back into the whiteout. Sierra didn't look back. She had one destination now. Sector 9, where the bait was set. Where the trap was waiting, and where they thought they'd bury her. But Sierra Cade wasn't coming to die. She was coming to end this. Sector 9 wasn't marked on any operational map. Not officially. It was a dead zone. No comms, no cover, no exits, except the one you came in through. A narrow canyon, carved by centuries of wind and water. It looked beautiful from above, like the earth had cracked open and revealed a sliver of blue marble. But for soldiers, it was a death funnel. And Sierra, still she went in anyway. The storm had already started to roll in. The first gust clawed at her parka, dragging ice crystals through the canyon like razors. The cloud ceiling dropped to treetop height, and the light turned silver gray, perfect camouflage for men waiting in the fog. She'd hiked for 20 minutes along the western ridge, descending slowly, carefully. Every step was a calculation, every sound measured. If they'd rigged this place as an ambush, they'd do it with drones, mines and long-range rifles. But what Sierra sensed was something different. Too quiet, too surgical. These weren't amateurs waiting to catch a target in their crosshairs. These were professionals preparing to disappear her. The moment she reached the canyon floor, the first round exploded behind her. A concussive grenade, non-lethal, meant to disorient. Her ears rang. Her hands instinctively went to the rifle, rolling to cover behind a boulder streaked with old blood. That's when she heard the voice. You made it farther than expected. The voice wasn't over comms, it was amplified, coming from an old field speaker bolted to the cliffside. Smooth, practiced, just like she remembered. Drav. He was close. Support staff, he said mockingly. That's what they called you. That's what we all thought. Until those 8 men stopped breathing. Sierra scanned the ledges. She could feel eyes on her. A dozen maybe more. I always knew you were alive, he continued. But I didn't expect you'd grow teeth. Sierra didn't respond. She focused instead on a faint shimmer, near the upper ridge, lens flare. A scope catching ambient light. She logged its position. You think this is justice? Drav said, now circling her with sound. But it's just revenge. Revenge turns snipers into corpses. You should have stayed behind your desk. She fired, one shot. The flare blinked out. Screams echoed from above. She rolled left as two more shots hit the stone, where her head had been seconds ago. They had at least 3 shooters. Maybe more, but now they knew she wouldn't freeze. Wouldn't beg. Sierra reached into her side pack, retrieved a thermal pod, and launched it toward the east wall. It erupted mid-air, casting a flare of false heat signatures across the slope. 2 snipers fired on instinct. She fired on calculation, both dropped. 3 down. The speaker crackled again, but this time there was tension in Drav's voice. You're not supposed to win this, he hissed. Sierra crouched low, breathing in the cold. You should have killed me back then, she said aloud, her voice steady. This is your last mistake. She sprinted toward a narrow crevice, leading to higher ground. Gunfire barked behind her, wild and undisciplined. She climbed, boots slipping on ice-slick rock, but her rifle never left her back. She'd learned long ago, mobility was survival, stillness was death. As she reached the top ledge, she found another man waiting, a heavy-set operator with a suppressor-equipped carbine. He lunged. She ducked under his swing, slammed the butt of her rifle into his jaw, then turned and buried a bullet in his temple. 4. The air was thinner now, but her focus sharpened. Drav's men were unraveling. He was losing control, but Sierra wasn't finished. She climbed higher still, past the outer ridge, onto a spine of rock that overlooked the canyon's narrowest bottleneck. There she saw it. A command tent. Camouflaged. Tucked into a gash in the rock, barely visible. Its side was flapping open, inside, movement. She couldn't see Drav clearly, but she saw the shape of him. She steadied her rifle. Wind 12 miles per hour, cross left. Range 1,100 meters. Dropped 2.4 meters. One breath. Then another. The shot broke like thunder, but when the tent collapsed, and the form inside crumpled. It wasn't Drav. It was a decoy. A body double. The real Drav was still out there. And worse, she'd just given away her position. The canyon erupted in gunfire. But Echo was already gone. Sierra ran, not recklessly. Not in panic. But with purpose. The moment the decoy dropped, and bullets started tearing through the canyon walls, she'd already moved. She ducked behind a ledge of ice-glazed rock, and kicked off into a steep ravine she had mapped hours earlier. It wasn't marked on any terrain report. She had found it through her own recon, a natural slide of scree and gravel that dropped 100 meters in near silence. She let herself fall with it. Rocks scraped her forearms. Ice bruised her ribs, but she didn't scream. She gritted her teeth and used her momentum to vanish deeper into the mountain's skeletal passages. Behind her, Drav's men searched the wrong ridgeline. They fired into the fog, hoping to scare a ghost. But Echo didn't scare. She burrowed beneath the storm, below the reach of drones and scopes, heart thundering, breath visible, in short, sharp clouds. She didn't stop moving until she hit the cavern she'd marked the night before, a slit in the mountain barely wide enough to crawl through. Inside, the world fell silent. No wind. No comms. Just the sound of her pulse and the faint hum of the drive in her chest pocket. The drive. She pulled it out, turned on her encrypted slate, and began decoding the last files left by the operative from Outpost Ilion. What she found was worse than she imagined. Drav wasn't just hunting her, he was preparing to weaponize the weather. The files revealed a classified project, Zeus Protocol, a Cold War-era experiment meant to simulate localized weather anomalies using satellite-triggered harmonic frequencies. The science had been deemed unstable, dangerous, capable of causing cyclonic events or drought-level heat waves, targeted down to a single valley, or city block. The project had been shut down decades ago, or so everyone thought. But Drav had restarted it, and he was testing it here, in this exact mountain range, where minimal media coverage, plausible deniability, and training exercises covered the evidence. The last data burst showed an activation sequence, scheduled in less than 36 hours. Target zone, civilian sector Rashad, south of the mountains. Population, 18,000. She stared at the screen, feeling the full weight of what it meant. This wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't just revenge, or even justice. It was prevention, and she was the only one in position to stop it. But how? She had no squad. No command clearance. No access to the satellite uplink Drav needed for the final phase. Unless, her eyes narrowed. There was one place. One forgotten station perched on the ridge between the western spines. An old relay base, decommissioned, unpowered, left to rot. But if she could reach it, patch into the uplink port, and override the signal, she could shut Zeus protocol down before it started. It would mean exposing herself, risking open engagement, risking everything. But if she didn't, Rashad would become a weather weapon test site. A mass grave with blue skies. She sealed the drive, tucked it into a watertight pouch, and steadied her rifle. Outside, the storm had grown teeth. The wind howled like wolves between the rocks. Snow whipped sideways in manic sheets, visibility plummeting to near zero. But Sierra stepped into it with clarity, every step cutting through uncertainty. She wasn't support. She wasn't revenge. She was the bullet that never missed. And she was headed straight for Drav's final play. A ghost in the storm. The wind was a living thing now. It screamed down the ridge in bursts of violence, rattling loose ice from ledges and hurling it into Sarah's path like shrapnel. The trail to the abandoned relay station was treacherous, buried under a foot of snow and jagged with obsidian rock. Each step had to be tested with the butt of her rifle. There was no room for mistakes. One wrong move, and she'd fall into a canyon the maps forgot. But Sarah didn't slow down. She was racing a countdown. She knew Drav would initiate his uplink soon, likely from a mobile command vehicle hidden near the outer perimeter. Once the satellite signal reached high orbit, it would trigger the Zeus protocol test without needing human input. The damage would look like a freak weather anomaly. No one would trace it back to him, unless she beat him there. The relay station was carved into a cliff face like a scar, rusted steel doors, bent antennas, and solar panels long dead. It had been abandoned years ago after a failed atmospheric project, but its uplink port was still registered on the old network, buried under miles of bureaucratic decay. Sarah had studied the schematics in her downtime. She'd been fascinated with dead tech, relics of war, things no one else cared to understand. Now that obsession would pay off. She reached the outer ledge just as lightning split the sky above. For a moment the entire mountain lit up. Every crag, every drop of snow outlined in blue-white fire. It showed her what she needed to see, boot prints, fresh, leading into the relay. Her stomach dropped. Drav had beaten her to it. She drew her sidearm and edged around the rocks toward the secondary entrance, a vent shaft wide enough to crawl through. Snow clogged the edges. She kicked it loose, slid in on her belly, and let gravity pull her toward the dark. Inside, the cold was worse. It wasn't just the mountain's breath anymore. It was the chill of silence, of dormant machines humming with the faint echo of reawakening. She landed in the control chamber, small, circular, lined with dead monitors and split wiring, and standing at the central console was a man in a black coat, adjusting a glowing slate connected to a portable transmitter. Drav. He hadn't aged much. Same squared jaw, same dead eyes. He looked up the moment she leveled her pistol at him. "Echo," he said calmly. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." She didn't speak, didn't blink. "Always the quiet one," he added. "Like your mother." Her hands tightened on the grip. "You erased them," she said. "I did," he replied without remorse. "Because they were going to ruin a program that could end wars before they started. Do you know what weather control means, Sarah? It means shaping the battlefield without a single bullet." "You're not ending war," she said coldly. You're giving tyrants a new toy. Drav stepped away from the console, slowly, carefully. You don't have to stop this, he said. You could control it, aim it at the ones who deserve it. Governments, regimes, monsters worse than me. I'm not like you. No, he nodded. You're better. That's what makes you dangerous. He moved too fast. In one breath, he dropped behind the console and pulled a compact weapon from his coat. Sarah dove left, rolled behind a pillar as bullets shattered the rusted monitors above her. The relay chamber exploded into chaos, metal on metal, sparks flying, concrete cracking under suppressed fire. Sarah waited, listened, calculated. Drav's breathing was ragged, untrained, sloppy. She waited for the exact moment the next shot echoed, then moved. One clean motion. She rose, pivoted, and fired. The round caught him in the shoulder. He crashed into the transmitter, knocking it over. The signal wavered, then stalled. Sarah advanced slowly, eyes never leaving him. You don't understand, Drav hissed through bloodied teeth. You can't stop it. She stepped over his body, yanked the drive from the console, and stared at the uplink code. There it was. The countdown, 0 hours 11 minutes and 47 seconds. 11 minutes. No time for hesitation. She slotted her own drive into the panel and began the override. Manual decryption, using legacy commands buried in the system's original firmware. A language Drav's team hadn't accounted for. She typed faster than she could breathe. 10 minutes. 9. 8. Then the screen froze. Override failed. Drav laughed behind her. Even you can't kill a ghost twice. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled the transmitter cable from the uplink, snapped it clean in her hands, and jammed it directly into her portable relay slate. If she couldn't shut it down from here, she'd send the signal herself. Somewhere above, a satellite realigned. The system rebooted, and the countdown halted at 0 hours 1 minute and 9 seconds. Sarah collapsed to her knees, breath burning her chest. It was over. Drav was unconscious, bleeding beside the console, but something told her this wasn't the last time someone would try to revive Zeus. She had stopped the storm for now, but shadows always learn to evolve, and sometimes they come back wearing new names. Lena lay flat against the rocky outcropping, her body molded into the cold earth, like it was part of the terrain itself. The temperature had dropped sharply, and the wind howled across the ridge in chaotic gusts, lifting grains of sand that scoured the skin like glass. She didn't flinch. Her spotter Rez lay 10 feet away behind a shattered tree trunk, scanning the valley below through his scope. Below them, the convoy of mercenary vehicles was approaching the narrow bend between two cliffs, the kill zone they had waited hours to confirm. Their orders were simple: confirm visual identity on the target known as the Broker, a logistics mastermind responsible for trafficking arms, children, and false diplomacy, then eliminate him. But everything about this op had been off from the start. Shuffled intel, a satellite blackout, communications going dead for 2 hours. Lena didn't say it aloud, but she felt the tension in her gut. This wasn't a mission, it was bait. I count 12 men total, Rez said quietly. Over comms. 2 vehicles. The SUV is armored. He's in the back seat, driver's side. Lena didn't respond. Her eye was locked on the distant form of the vehicle. She adjusted the dial on her scope, fine-tuning the parallax. A kilometer away, the SUV's glass gleamed in the sun. It was a perfect shot, except for the distortion. The wind was shifting rapidly. Between the heat shimmer off the rocks and the unpredictable gusts, a shot at this distance was no longer textbook. Rez knew it too. This isn't ideal. Wind's dancing all over the valley. Lena whispered back, wind is just time breathing. You listen long enough, it tells you what it's about to do. Rez blinked. He never got used to her strange metaphors, but they always meant something precise when it came to ballistics. She rolled her fingers across the rifle's side, a custom XM 2010 she had tuned by hand, then settled back into stillness. Her breathing slowed, heart rate dropped, noise faded, and then she heard it. The way the wind funneled between two formations, a rhythm like lungs inhaling before a scream. It was about to stall. She waited. 5 seconds. 4. 3. The wind stopped. She squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the valley like thunder. The SUV's glass imploded in a fine mist. Before the sound of impact even echoed back, the vehicle veered wildly, the driver panicking. Lena was already cycling the bolt. The second shot took the front tire. The third dropped the passenger, who stepped out with a radio. Rez watched in stunned silence as she dropped 5 more men in succession. Center mass, throat, femoral, temple, before the last bullet even echoed off the canyon walls. 8 shots, 8 kills, all at ranges over 2,800 meters. Rez finally broke radio silence with a whisper that wasn't meant for Lena, but for whatever God had just witnessed this. Jesus, you're not support, you're the entire storm. But Lena wasn't celebrating. Her fingers hovered over the trigger again. Something was wrong. One of the bodies, the broker, hadn't slumped like a normal death fall. The way he dropped had too much coordination. And the blood, too dark, too quick. Lena snapped up her scope and zoomed in. Her stomach twisted. The man she shot had a prosthetic face, a decoy with a heat signature patch beneath his collar. She hadn't killed the broker. The real one wasn't even there. It had been a test of her skills, of her range, of her reach. She felt exposed now, not as the predator, but as prey. The radio crackled. A new voice came through. Lena Voss, you've passed the audition. We'll be in touch soon. She looked to Rez. His face was pale. What the hell was that? She didn't answer. She was already dismantling her rifle. Not from fear, from focus. Someone wanted her skills, and they had just made themselves known. They packed up fast. Rez didn't even ask if they were going to debrief with command. He just started moving. Because after that voice came through the comms, they both understood something deeper than orders. This mission was never about taking someone out. It was about seeing if she could. They made their way back through the ridgeline under cover of dusk, shadows melting into one another, their boots tracing the paths of wild goats rather than soldiers. No GPS, no digital trail. Every movement felt like it echoed too loud in the silence of the rocks. Lena was unusually quiet. Rez noticed. He glanced back once. You knew they were watching. I didn't know, she said. I suspected. Rez let out a breath that sounded like a curse. That voice wasn't from Ops. I don't even think it was on our frequency. It wasn't, she said, tightening the strap on her ruck. It was outside the grid, untraceable to us, but not to them. Who's them? Lena paused. The ones who built the map of pain. The ones who trained me how to counter it. They never stopped watching. They just waited for me to become something useful. Rez stared at her. You think this is about your past? Lena didn't answer, because she knew. It was never about erasing her past. It was about weaponizing it. They reached their extraction zone, a narrow ravine with a dead satellite tower twisted in on itself like a broken rib. The pickup chopper never arrived. Instead they found a case, black, unmarked. Lena opened it without hesitation. Inside, a single folded garment, a pressure suit, civilian grade but laced with advanced neural fiber, the kind used in zero-gravity combat simulations. And beneath it, a thumb drive embedded in a glass vial. Rez picked it up. This yours? Lena looked at it, then shook her head slowly. No, it's bait. But she took it anyway. Back at the temporary safe house, a forgotten village shelter with no power, she wired the drive into her analog decrypt rig. Rez stood back. No cameras, no mics, just copper wire, signal boosters and silence. What played was footage of her, grainy, black and white, time-stamped from years ago. Training exercises, torture simulations, combat analysis. The very first time she snapped a man's neck underwater, while still shackled. The first time she dislocated her own shoulder to escape a hold. The first time she walked through a corridor of gas without blinking. And then new footage, not of the past, of now. A live feed of Rez and her walking into the safe house. From above, from inside. Rez froze. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Lena stood calmly, watching herself from 20 seconds ago, projected on her own equipment. Then the screen went black, and text began to scroll. Control is an illusion. You've mastered survival. Now we offer purpose. We call it Project Yarrow. You're already in it. Rez grabbed her shoulder. We have to go. They know we're here. Lena looked at him, her voice steel. No, we don't run. Not yet. You think we can fight something that can see us through our own walls? No, she said, and pulled the drive. But we can be the thing that looks back. Rez blinked. What does that even mean? It means they're not just watching to recruit me. They're trying to resurrect something I buried years ago. Something I killed inside myself to survive. Rez whispered. What if they succeed? Lena didn't hesitate. Then they better learn how to survive. Outside the wind howled. But this time it didn't sound like chaos. It sounded like a name, whispered across concrete and blood. It sounded like the long shot had been reversed. And now she was the one watching. Lena had never considered her body her own. Not because of modesty, not because of trauma, though she carried more of that than bone, but because for as long as she could remember, it had been studied, dissected, analyzed like a weapon schematic. Every scar, every adaptation to pain, every reflex she'd taught herself in the dark, someone else had a file on it. And now, that file had been reopened. Rez tried to downplay it at first. Maybe they're bluffing, he said, checking the perimeter with night vision optics. But Lena just shook her head. She'd seen the way the drive decrypted its own contents in real time, seen the metadata, the embedded timestamps, the fact that whoever sent it hadn't just hacked their shelter, they'd designed it. Long before she ever stepped inside, Project Yarrow wasn't new, it was old. She remembered that name once whispered in a freezing underground facility, when she was 14. They said it was the final program, the one that came after you broke the person, not to build them back, but to reprogram them, turn everything they'd endured into a tool set. And the key was always blackmail. Lena stood in front of the cracked mirror in the shelter and peeled off her shirt. Her torso was a roadmap of wars, no one documented. But even she hadn't noticed the faint seam along her lower ribs, not until now. Rez, she called softly. He turned, and for a moment, he looked away out of respect, until he saw the look on her face. Something was under her skin, a shimmer in the low light. Rez stepped closer and squinted. That's embedded tech. He didn't ask how it got there. She didn't answer. They both knew. She picked up a rusted utility blade from the medkit, sterilized it with flame, and without ceremony, cut into her own side. Blood ran, but only briefly. What she extracted was no larger than a bullet fragment, but its surface pulsed once, then glowed. Rez leaned over. That's a biometric transmitter. Not just biometric, she murmured. It's a pain amplifier. They used it in stress testing, looping signals from nerve clusters to push thresholds further. They left that inside you. They installed it inside me, she corrected. Because Lena had never been human to them. She had been data. Rez stared at the pulsing device. They think your body is still theirs. Lena nodded slowly, wrapping the wound and crushing the chip under her boot heel. Then she looked up. And that's their mistake. Blackmail only worked if you feared exposure, if you believed you had something to lose. Lena had already lost everything. Her childhood, her name, her agency. What she had now wasn't a reputation. It was leverage. Because if they wanted to activate Project Yarrow, they'd underestimated the core flaw in their plan. Lena remembered everything, not just the pain, but who inflicted it. She could name every doctor who signed off on the modifications, every general who watched her from behind mirrored glass, every civilian advisor who took notes while she screamed. They had built a living weapon, and then tried to hide her in plain sight. But she'd trained herself not just to counter pain, she'd trained herself to trace it, back to its source. Rez powered down all his devices, and began prepping their escape gear. But Lena didn't pack. She picked up a pen, and an old field journal, began sketching layouts, names, coordinates. You're building a hit list? Rez asked. No, she replied. I'm building a message. Because the ones who used her body as a blueprint were about to discover what happened when a weapon learned to write its own instructions. And the first lesson, never try to control what you don't fully understand, especially when it remembers everything you forgot to erase. Lena didn't sleep that night. Sleep was for people who didn't have blueprints etched into their skin. She had always been a project, never a person. And now as she flipped through the pages of her old field journal, memories came not as emotions, but as floor plans, blind spots, soundproof zones, rooms with reinforced glass, and a single chair bolted to the floor. Rez watched her from across the bunker, not speaking. He knew that look. It wasn't rage. It was calculus. War calculus. "What are you really planning?" he finally asked. Lena looked up, eyes glassy with memory, but sharpened by purpose. "They built me as a response," she said. "A reaction to chaos. And now, I'm becoming the cause." Rez frowned. "That's not you." She didn't argue, because it wasn't the girl he met years ago in the fallout ruins of Tyvek 7, but it was the woman the system had sculpted out of needles, silence, and drills pressed to bone. She had names now, dozens, not aliases, architects, the ones who sat behind the screens while she broke her own bones to escape every trap they designed. She remembered Dr. Halvers from Omega Chamber 12. He smiled while he reset her dislocated jaw, whispering about neural recalibration. She remembered Elena Roth, the woman who called herself a caretaker, but oversaw Lena's threshold expansion trials, like she was managing livestock. And worst of all, she remembered Vice Marshal Trensick. He never touched her, never raised his voice, but he signed every order, authorized every dose, every nerve stimulation surge, every cognitive punishment routine that played lullabies backwards until her brain reprogrammed itself. Lena had the files, names, voices, schedules, shadow designations. She hadn't meant to gather them. Her brain simply refused to forget. She laid them out now like puzzle pieces. Rez leaned closer. "These aren't just people. These are ghost operatives, corporate embeds, defense analysts. They thought I wouldn't know how to trace them back. And I traced everyone who ever treated me like I was a prototype." Rez tapped a paper clip to the side of his comm unit. "You're declaring war." "No," Lena said. "I'm declaring exposure." Rez stood. The light had shifted in her now. It wasn't just vengeance. It was engineering. She wasn't planning a spree of destruction. She was building a system collapse. "They built you from a blueprint," he said. "And now you're drawing your own." "Not drawing," she corrected. "Etching." Lena reached under the floor grate and pulled out a second journal, one they hadn't seen before. Rez raised a brow. "That's not yours." "No," she whispered. "It belonged to someone who came before me." The pages were fragile, stained with age and ash. Notes, code names, experiments. It detailed another subject, Subject 07. Lena was 08. The realization stunned them both. "You weren't the first," Rez breathed. "And I wasn't the only one they lost control of," Lena added. Subject 07 had escaped before Lena was even selected, disappeared off-grid, leaving behind only this journal, and rumors of a facility fire. But the notes, they were survival tactics, counter-conditioning, trigger, dismantling. It was a guidebook for psychological detonation from the inside out. Lena flipped to the last page. A name had been scribbled there. One name only. Not a handler, not a victim, but an operative. And beneath it a location code. A dormant site in the northern glacial belts. Rez leaned in, eyes wide. "That's not a prison." "No," Lena said. "It's a back door." Suddenly her blueprint changed. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about a network of survivors who'd been rewritten and repurposed. Lena wasn't the last one. She might be the only one awake, but the others were still out there, waiting, buried in programming, triggered by pain. But maybe, just maybe, she could rewrite the code, and the first test of her counter-program would begin where the system first cracked, with Subject 07, the prototype that got away. The coordinates led them far beyond sanctioned zones, past the frost lines where most drones failed from signal loss or cold crack. No heat signatures, no motion. No satellites dared scan the glacial belt twice. Which meant only one thing: someone wanted it to stay forgotten. Lena and Rez moved under cover of aurora storms, skating their tracked cruiser across ice fields, following a beacon from the old journal that pulsed every 17 minutes, a pulse that was analog, crude, and undetectable to modern surveillance systems. "Why 17 minutes?" Rez asked, huddled beneath the cockpit canopy. "That's how long Subject 07 said it took, before the neural reinforcements kicked back in." Lena answered. Rez didn't reply. He didn't have to. They both understood whoever left that beacon knew the system from inside out. They reached a vertical cliff face by dusk, etched with old burn marks and rebar that twisted like shattered nerves. It was here the pulse grew strongest. Lena's gloves trembled as she brushed away a slab of frost, revealing a keypad long dead. But when she placed her hand on it, it didn't require a code. It pulsed back, like it recognized her. The door hissed open with a mechanical wheeze, releasing a breath of stale air that smelled like copper and old sorrow. They entered. Inside was darkness, broken only by the faint humming of obsolete tech running on fail-safes. Not a prison, not a lab, but a mirror. It was a testing ground for operatives who'd been pushed past the brink. Walls marked with impact dents, scratches, blood trails. It wasn't empty. It had history. She found them, rows of cryo-chambers with names scratched off, subjects long since purged from records. Rez read the remaining ID tags aloud. Subject 01, Subject 03, Subject 06, No 02, No 04, and No 07. But the final chamber at the end of the corridor was cracked open, frozen handprints streaked across the interior glass. She was gone. Or awake. Or worse, activated. And next to that chamber, scrawled in cracked red paint, were the words, "If you found me, then you're next." Lena stared. Her pulse didn't race. Her breath didn't quicken. She simply understood. Subject 07 wasn't warning her. She was inviting her. Rez began to panic. "Lena, this isn't just some survivor. She's a predator now. A live weapon in the wild." "She's proof," Lena replied, "that you can override the conditioning. That escape isn't just physical, it's neurological." Rez lowered his voice. "Or she's proof that some damage doesn't get undone." Lena turned to him. "I don't need to be undone. I need to be unleashed." They explored further, reaching a lower chamber that had been blackened by fire. Data cores melted, chairs reduced to slag, but one thing had survived, a wall of recordings. Lena activated the first. A flickering image appeared, Subject 07, eyes wide with clarity, voice steady. "I was built to feel nothing," she said. "But feeling nothing is the perfect space to install new truths." I began rewriting mine, one trigger at a time. Lena's fingers curled into fists. This wasn't madness. This was method. The videos revealed her process, pain rechanneled into mapping, trauma broken down into algorithms, and then the triggers. Trigger 1. Subject 07 had said, "Reclaim control through prediction." Every handler had a pattern. Find the pattern. Rewrite the response. Lena knew that pattern. Dr. Halvers used to hum the same lullaby before every injection. Vice Marshal Trensick tapped his pen twice before signing a neural escalation order. Patterns, not commands. Triggers waiting to be broken. Lena replayed the footage. Watched 07 use that trigger to override a nerve lock. To stand when she should have collapsed. To speak when she was meant to go silent. Rez watched in awe. She didn't just escape. She hacked herself. She became her own weapon. Lena looked at the cracked glass of the final chamber again. "Then that's what I'll do too." Rez stared. "You're going to activate your own triggers. I'm going to override them. This isn't about revenge anymore. This is about reprogramming a generation who were taught to stay quiet." She lifted the journal and turned to a blank page. "Trigger 1, she wrote. Predict the handlers." She underlined it twice. Then looked up. "This is only the beginning." Because for every survivor like her, there were dozens more still sleeping. And to wake them, she'd need to go deeper than memory. She'd need to enter the place they all feared. The place where pain first became instruction, where fear became obedience. The core facility. Rez froze. "You're going back." "No," Lena said, closing the book. "I'm going to finish what they started." The route to the core facility wasn't just forbidden, it was mythologized. It was said to sit beneath the Arctic mantle, wrapped in electromagnetic storms so violent that even satellites blinked out when they passed overhead. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it was where the prototypes were built, broken and buried. Lena and Rez descended in silence, the cruiser's systems flickering as magnetic interference ramped up. By the time they reached the ice trench, gravity itself felt heavier, like the Earth was mourning what lay below. Rez clutched the side rail. "You're sure it's here?" Lena didn't answer. She knelt, running her gloved fingers over the fractured crust of permafrost. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a shard of blackened glass, the same one that had been embedded in her back after her last escape. She pressed it to the ice. A pulse shuddered through the ground. A deep mechanical groan echoed beneath them. The ice split. A staircase revealed itself, spiraling into darkness. Rez swallowed hard. "This feels like walking into the end of the world." "It is," Lena replied. "Just not ours." They descended. Each step brought back buried signals. Flash memories. Flickers of the conditioning rooms. Rez's breath caught as motion-triggered lights snapped on, revealing walls etched with thousands of names, some printed, others clawed in. Children's names. Test numbers. Most followed by the same two words. Filed. Integration. The further they walked, the less stable the facility looked. Walls peeled. Cables hung like vines. And at the bottom they reached a steel hatch guarded by two deactivated sentries. Mechs with human skulls wired into their chassis. Rez gagged. Lena didn't flinch. She knew what they were. Early control experiments. Failed attempts to merge the biological with the programmable. And yet even dead, the mechs were humming faintly, looping a distorted phrase. "Obey and be loved. Obey and be loved. Obey and what?" Lena tore the wire loose. Silence returned. She keyed open the hatch. What lay beyond was not a lab. It was a throne room of agony. A spherical chamber lined with hundreds of chair pods, each still holding the skeletal remains of its occupant. They hadn't escaped. They hadn't fought back. They had simply been forgotten. Rez backed away. "This is a grave." "No," Lena whispered. "This is where they tested how much pain the mind could bear." She approached the center where one chair stood upright, different from the others. Sleek. Polished. Waiting. As if reserved. Its headrest had her old unit number carved into it. All-09. "I remember this chair. It was the first place I forgot my name." Rez looked shaken. "Why would you come back here?" "Because this is where the triggers were installed. And it's the only place they can be dismantled." She sat. The chair locked around her wrists and ankles instantly, as if welcoming her home. Rez screamed. "Lena, no." But it was too late. The pod ignited. Neural spikes drove signals deep into her hippocampus. Old command lines reactivated. Pain memory flooded her cortex. She screamed. Saw flashes. The surgery table. The first time they showed her a photo of her mother and told her she'd betrayed her. The moment she bit down on glass to prove she couldn't be controlled. The cold voice of the lead architect whispering, "You don't need a name. You need a function." And then she saw something new. A face she didn't recognize. A girl. Strapped to a table. Eyes wild with defiance. The name on her tag. V08. Valencia. Lena gasped. She'd never met her. But their minds had been connected. Their pain shared. She wasn't the only survivor who returned. Valencia had found the core too. But instead of dismantling it, she'd done something else. She'd rewired it. The system stopped processing Lena as a threat. It began learning from her instead. Recording. Mirroring. And then a prompt appeared in her vision. Trigger override protocol detected. Install new instructions. U1, and she blinked once. Yes. The pod vibrated. New code flooded in. But this time she wrote it. Not a command. A declaration. "I am not your weapon. I am not your failure. I am not your experiment. I am the retribution code." The chair snapped open. Steam hissed. Lena stood, every nerve in her body screaming. But alive. Free. Rez rushed to her side. Are you okay? She looked at him, blood trickling from her nose. Her voice was calm. I'm not just okay. I'm ready. Rez stared. For what? She turned toward the terminal now glowing behind the throne. For activation. She reached out and typed a single phrase, Rel Waken. All subjects, and pressed enter. Somewhere across the globe old cryo chambers hissed open. Eyes opened. Memories surged. And for the first time in years, survivors remembered their names. Lena walked back into the corridor as the facility began to hum with new life. It had once broken them. Now it would be their weapon. They had no idea that the final test wouldn't be conducted in simulation, but in scorched terrain at over 3,000 meters above sea level. Thin air, unpredictable winds and no second chances. They were still under the illusion that Celine's trial would be just that, a demonstration. What none of them understood was that Command had just greenlit a real extraction mission, and Celine had been picked to provide overwatch. Live. Her role would either validate her training or expose it as a fluke. There would be no observers, no friendly backup, just a classified target zone in the Argat Highlands, a rescue team on the ground, and a convoy of hostiles moving in from the east. Celine would have only minutes to act, with nothing but a thermal scope, a wind meter, and her instincts. Lieutenant Brax, the commander of the rescue team, didn't hide his unease when he saw her gear up beside him. I thought they were sending a Tier 1 marksman, he muttered. Celine didn't reply. She didn't need to. She just looked him in the eyes and said, I only need eyes on. Then she hiked up the ridge, leaving the team behind. By the time the extraction team began moving, Celine had already crawled to her perch. From her position she had a clear view of a kilometer-wide valley, a corridor between two cliffs, dotted with broken brush and jagged rocks. The evac point was on the far side, and the enemy convoy, 3 pickups, 6 hostiles and 1 armored vehicle, was expected to intercept from the north. Celine would have to keep them at bay long enough for the team to reach the chopper and lift off. 8 targets. Wind speed fluctuating, altitude effects compounding. It wasn't going to be pretty. The team's extraction began as scheduled, the sounds of gravel crunching and boots running below her. Celine lay completely still, hands on the trigger, breathing synced to her pulse. She spotted the first truck coming around the far bend, still over 2,500 meters out, but closing fast. She dialed her scope, calculated bullet drop, corrected wind drift, and then she fired. The first target dropped with a sharp whip of air, clean, precise, straight through the left ocular socket. The truck swerved. Panic erupted among the passengers. Celine had already chambered her second round. She fired again. Driver gone. The truck crashed into a boulder. 2 down. 6 to go. Celine adjusted, recalibrated, sweat dripping, despite the icy mountain wind. The second truck accelerated, trying to flank along the upper trail. She aimed slightly above the target's shoulder to account for incline, and fired. Third target, clipped through the collarbone, tumbling down the cliffside. The vehicle stopped short, passengers diving for cover. They hadn't located her position yet. Good. Team moving, came Brax's voice in her comms, clipped and urgent. 200 meters out, the armored vehicle roared to life and began maneuvering through a dry riverbed, shielded from direct line of sight. Celine cursed softly. She shifted her position slightly, just enough to get the angle. Her fourth shot punched through a gunner's exposed plate. As he emerged through the turret, he dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. Then the wind turned. Hard. Sudden crosswind spiraled into the canyon. Celine gritted her teeth and waited. No rush. Precision mattered more than volume. She steadied her breath and fired a 5th shot. Miss. Too much drift. She recalculated. Fired again. Direct chest hit. 5 down. But they had found her now. Muzzle flashes erupted from the ridge across from her. Bullets peppered her position, kicking up dust and stone. Celine rolled left, reloading mid-movement. She aimed again. 6th shot. Direct hit to the chest. 7th. She clipped the sniper who had just taken a bead on her. Only one target left. The final hostile was fleeing, scrambling into the vehicle. Celine waited, exhaled and fired one last time. Her 8th target dropped. Face first. Less than 2 meters from the safety of the vehicle. Brax's voice came in again, panting but steady. We're at the LZ. Choppers en route. Whoever you are. Damn. Celine said nothing, just exhaled once more, and started to crawl back down the ridge. She had proven what nobody believed. Again. Not in simulation, not in controlled training, but under fire, under pressure, with real lives on the line. And now, command wouldn't be able to ignore her. She wasn't just support. She was the difference between life and death. When the debrief began, it wasn't in a sterile white room. It was in a sealed concrete bunker. Walls lined with bulletproof glass. Guards stationed at every corner. And a one-way mirror behind which the real decision-makers sat in shadow. Celine stood in front of a tribunal of 5. They weren't interested in asking her questions. They were interested in studying her. Because for the first time in years, a solo operator had executed a long-range overwatch with 0 civilian casualties. Perfect enemy elimination. And no need for backup. Under real battlefield conditions. But what haunted them wasn't the numbers. It was how calm she had been. How still her pulse remained even as she listed each target she eliminated. How her voice didn't waver. Not once. How did you learn this level of composure? One of the tribunal members asked. Celine's answer was a single sentence. I've already died once. The room went silent. The tribunal lead shifted. Clearly uncomfortable. And the second time. I'll choose that moment myself. They didn't press her further. Instead, they pulled up footage from her body cam. Slow motion clips of her trigger squeeze. The micro corrections in her aim. The eerie calm in her breathing. Then came footage from her childhood. They had accessed the old files. Grainy surveillance from the orphanage. Medical scans from the program. Even footage of her surgical procedures. What started as an evaluation quickly turned into a revelation. The tribunal wasn't judging her. They were preparing to deploy her. We've reviewed your results, the lead said. And we've decided to assign you to Project Halo. Celine's eyes narrowed slightly. Project Halo was myth, even inside the most classified black sites. It was only spoken of in fragments. An elite unit operating outside any known jurisdiction, comprised of people who shouldn't exist. People like her. This isn't a request. The lead continued. You've been drafted. Celine stood still, jaw tight. They thought this would scare her. But what they didn't realize was that this was her proving ground. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded once and walked out of the room. A day later, she was flown in complete darkness to an unnamed location across the ocean. The aircraft had no windows. She was seated in a steel chair with magnetic restraints. Not for her safety, but for theirs. When she arrived, a woman met her on the tarmac. Tall, pale, silver-gray hair, tied in a tight knot. Codename: Erin Vale, director of Project Halo. She didn't speak much, just walked Celine to a facility carved into a cliffside. No signage, no visible doors, just a retinal scanner on a rock face that blinked open like a steel iris. Inside, Celine was met with something she hadn't expected. Others. 3 of them. Each different, each strange, each scarred. One wore blackout goggles permanently fused to his face. His optic nerves had been rerouted for thermal targeting. Another girl had an augmented spinal system that let her bend like a serpent, strike faster than a knife. The third sat silent, hooked up to a neurofeedback loop that allowed him to interpret heartbeat rhythms from a kilometer away. And now Celine was among them, not as a test subject, but as an equal. Aaron led them into a cold chamber, lined with obsidian black walls and flickering interface glass. This, she said, is where gods are manufactured. No one laughed, because they knew the cost. They knew that to wield this kind of power, you had to surrender the pieces that made you human. Celine didn't blink. She had long since buried those pieces. As the lights dimmed, and the chamber sealed, Celine placed her palm on the final console. A hiss of biometric recognition. Her file uploaded automatically. Name. Redacted codename. Celine status operational designation. Strategic ghost clearance. Level Alpha directive. Level counterintelligence through unconventional warfare. A silent alarm pulsed behind the walls. Halo had just activated their most dangerous weapon, and the world didn't even know she existed. It began without sound. A ripple in the dark web, a nameless signal routed through 7 satellites, piggybacked on disused Soviet systems, cloaked in the dead language of obsolete code, and only one person understood it. Celine sat alone in a black chamber, her breath sinking with the flicker of quantum streams around her. Her mind no longer required language to process threats. She saw the world in probabilities, in pressure points, in ruptures before they formed. And now the system was breathing again. Something had awakened a protocol even the tribunal had buried deep. A target. No. Not a target. A caller. Someone from the original facility. Not a survivor. A hunter. She leaned forward, data unraveled like silk. Encrypted photos. Voice modulations. Movement across old kill zones she'd once cleared. Someone had been retracing her past steps, finding the ghosts she left behind, reactivating trauma points she thought buried. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. She wasn't just being observed anymore. She was being summoned. Aaron Vale entered the chamber silently. There's been an emergence, she said. An old program, off-grid, autonomous. Celine didn't look away from the projection. They're testing me, she said quietly. Aaron's jaw tightened. No, they're baiting you. Celine stood, the others in Halo. Her unit watched as she pulled on her gear. Not military regulation, but bespoke fiber-laced shadow weave, coated with reactive nanocarbon. Designed for one person and one person only. No one tried to stop her. They knew better. When Celine moved, she did so with purpose. But this time, there was something else in her posture. Not rage, not revenge. Resolve. She boarded the craft alone. No pilot, just her. A silent autopilot took her toward a frozen wasteland. Coordinates, etched in memory, where it all began. Where she had once clawed through snow with bleeding fingers and shattered bones. Only now, she descended in silence, like a reaper reclaiming sacred ground. The old compound was still there, rusting, silent, but no longer dead. As she entered, lights flickered on. One by one, footsteps echoed. Hers. And then, another. From the shadows stepped a figure. Familiar, wrong. Not quite alive, not quite human. Her mirror, the failed clone. They had taken her data, her scans, her EEG imprints, and tried to replicate her resilience, but without her suffering, her fire, her history. They had only built a shell. The clone stepped forward, mimicking her gait, her breathing, even the faint scar beneath her left eye. I was made to surpass you. Celine tilted her head slightly. Then why are you afraid? The clone faltered. It was just enough. Celine struck fast. Silent. Devastating. But this wasn't just a fight. It was a purge of her past.
her design, her legacy as someone else's weapon. As concrete walls shattered, and the snowstorm outside surged inward, Celine drove the clone backward, into the core chamber where it all began. One last breath, one last blow, and silence. She stood over the broken replica, no hate in her eyes, only freedom. Outside, the ice cracked beneath her boots as she walked away. No extraction, no mission complete, just peace. For the first time, back at Halo, Aaron received a message, subject off-grid. No signal presumed lost, but Aaron didn't believe that. She knew better, because ghosts don't disappear. They choose where to be seen. And Celine, she had chosen silence. She had chosen freedom, because pain had trained her. But she was no longer its student. She had become the author of her own war, and her story would never be written in files again, only in legends. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.